Hi, HR Nation, it's Chris Rainey. Welcome to HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR practitioners 5 days a week. Today, we have a special guest. We're joined by Bruce Daisley, Vice President of EMEA at Twitter, creator of the hit business podcast, Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat, and author of the upcoming book, The Joy of Work, 30 Ways to Fix Your Work Culture and Fall in Love with Your Job Again. Bruce, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello there. Thanks for having me. Very well.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really excited because I've got a fellow podcaster on the show today.
Yeah, I mean, you and me talking about editing there, certainly it's one for the purists, isn't it? I don't think anyone else would have enjoyed it.
Yeah. Guys, before the show, I was just like racking Bruce's brain about how to edit, what software we use. I don't really get this opportunity as well, so we don't want to bore you guys with those details. Bruce, tell everyone a little bit about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today.
So I work at Twitter. So I've worked at Twitter for pretty much 7 years. I was one of the first recruits when we opened our London office and sort of helped us go from 7 employees to sort of about several hundred now. And so, I've played a part in building that. And I think, to connect that with the wider thing is that people used to come to our London office and say, wow, there's just an incredible culture here. And I'd previously worked at Google. I'd worked at places where people sort of said that they had great cultures. And so for them, people to come to the London office of Twitter and say, wow, this is an incredible environment. This is a great culture. I'm buzzing off being here, was incredibly flattering. And I think in truth, I told myself I was good at culture, which was an error. Because certainly subsequently, I noticed that people were a couple of years ago, people were sort of showing signs of weariness and maybe feeling less connected to their job. And I set about thinking, as a practitioner, I think, HR is the job of everyone and culture is the job of everyone. And I set about thinking, what's the best way for me to re-energize this culture? And I started looking for books. And while there are a lot of books that sort of like a very specific, uncertain things, there weren't any books that were like a beginner's guide to how to get people re-energized at work. And so I started a podcast on it. And I started a podcast largely as an attempt really for me to think about what's the way for me to improve this working environment here. And I thought, I'm going to do 6 of these. And there's no shame in just doing 6. And then what happened was
You got addicted like me.
Yeah. But I thought I sort of got 4 in. And I thought, I tell you who I'd love to chat to. I'd love to chat to Patty McCord, the woman who wrote the Netflix culture document. And I contacted her and she's like, yeah, I'll speak to you tomorrow. I'm like, right, damn. So I spent my night sort of preparing for that. I interviewed her the next day. And then I thought, you know who I'd like to speak to? And I just started.
I'm the same, by the way. That's like the same reason I messaged you.
Yeah.
I'd like to speak to Bruce. Let me message him and see if he'll come on the show.
Yeah. And I started emailing people. And then people were like, yeah, I'll definitely come on. I was like, okay, well, this is going to be more than 6. What was a revelation to me? I remember sitting with Andre Spicer, who's a lecturer at Cass Business School. Incredibly intelligent, erudite, sort of quite subversive thinker. I remember sitting with him and he was sort of talking about how open plan offices were a disaster for productivity. I was like, wow, I'm like, and now it's clear to me that that's the case. But I was like, wow, this is just a revelation to me because time and time again, I'm being confronted with the fact that what we do at work, all of the academics, all of the people who study this would recommend we do the opposite. And it just really struck me that, we're in an environment where people who do jobs are doing it completely divorced from the science and the understanding of people who study jobs. And so for me, it became like this sort of obsession. I think is probably the word for it. It became this obsession, right? I was seeing people were broken by work, whether it was friends I was meeting at weekends or, people you'd encounter who just looked exhausted. And I realized, wow, it's because all of the people who study work would advise us not to be doing it in this way. And we're ignoring that. So it became like this mission, really. Can we fix work? And that's why I've ended up doing a book. I was doing the podcast and the podcast sort of developed a bit of momentum to it. And I made this sort of 8-point new work manifesto, with a friend of mine. And the idea behind that was, no one is going to come in and fix work for us. No one is going to come in, even an HR department are not going to sort of announce that here are the fixes to work. And some of the things that I'd discovered in terms of making work feel less bad were quite trivial. They were like, turn the notifications off on your phone. They were like, take a lunch break. And so we put a few of those things into a manifesto saying, these are actually feel quite mundane, but if you do some of these things, you're going to feel better about your job and your work culture is going to benefit from it. And by putting that into a manifesto, I had people in the NHS contact us, I had police services, I had, like people we didn't expect contacting us. And Penguin contacted me saying, would you turn it into a book? And so that was it. That it came from that, really.
I suppose the manifestos are going to be in the book, but do you also have that published somewhere? So
if you search for New Work Manifesto, it comes up, and there's
I'll find it and link it to you guys.
Yeah, and the thing about that was we thought the thing I feel really strongly is that generally CEOs they might be interested in these things, but they go to a course at Stanford or they go to a course at London Business School. They don't listen to podcasts and they don't do these things. And when it comes to fixing work, you often got a 20-something or a passionate 30-something who wants to fix work, but they don't have much of a voice. And so the idea behind the New Work Manifesto website and the idea behind the book really is that one person armed with an article or a TED talk can change things. They can bring it to that team offsite, the away day you've got where people are like, okay, we've got an hour slot. What does someone want to discuss? You can bring along a meeting, from Harvard Business Review or an article from The Guardian, and you can say, guys, how about we talk about this? And I'm really convinced that one passionate person with an article can change things. So that was the idea. So the book is like 30 ways to change work. And the intention being really that I suspect people don't finish books, they don't read books. But if people read one of these things and they take it to a team meeting and they say, guys, how about we try this? And, all of these things work. They take it along and they say to people, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. I'm convinced that you can sort of start this Lego brick wall of little things that you gradually change your work. So on the New Work Manifesto website, it's just TED Talks or these just articles that you can read that would inspire people to hopefully just change their work by 1%.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. And I love the way you've approached it as well, because you're kind of just curating everything together for everyone, which is amazing as well. And by the way, I like the way your thought process of the book as well, because I am a culprit of getting halfway through a book and then picking up another book. But I know quite a few people that are the same as well. But if you've designed it in a way that I'm already going to get 15 of those 30 anyway, if it's it for me, even if I walk away with one or two of them, it's going to be valuable.
Yeah. And look, I'm sort of, first and foremost, I'm a passionate lover of work, right? But I was chatting to someone close to me and I said, look, the reason why I love my job is I laugh every day. And the reason why I love my job is that, I feel inspired by the people who work with me are better than me. And I spoke to this person and she said, in my work, a lot of people are crying in the toilet, during lunch times, or a lot of people feel like they're never listened to. And I thought, wow, okay, I wonder if we could change that work. I wonder if by these little interventions, we can improve work for those people. And so that's my feeling that, if you create a big book that you need to get to the end before there's any benefit, I'm just not convinced you're going to help change things. Whereas if one of the things I'm really passionate about in this book, and there's 2 chapters on it, is the power of laughter. And it's one of those things, if you're sitting there, Chris, and you're laughing at your desk, that laughter makes you feel happier in your job and more rewarded. But I struggled because I'd been in environments where bosses had told me in the past, now's not the time for laughter. Look, we're having a bad quarter. I don't want to see anyone laughing. And I was sure in my head.
It makes it worse.
Right. It makes it worse. It makes it worse. And so I spent a long time looking into the science of laughter. And look, you won't be surprised. Laughter opens up your creativity. Laughter increases your collaboration. Laughter ensures that you feel more committed to the cause. Laughter's, the best time to be laughing is when times are bad. You know,
Yeah.
I'm always reminded, like when you see on TV football and you see someone on the bench is laughing. And if you're ever watching football in a pub, you'll see like there'll always be that guy in the pub saying, now's not the time for laughing. No, that is the time for laughter. Because if you can develop the resilience that
I don't think
laughter
you can get through it otherwise.
that's
I think
right.
I've always been like the most stressful situations. Sometimes I'm like, guys, let's just go for a walk, or let's just get
Yeah.
out of this environment, cheer up, have a bit of fun, then come back to it and with a new mindset and a new energy. Otherwise, it just gets worse and worse and worse.
And it's exactly that. And if you chat to people who have stressful jobs, they often find that it's the laughter that acts as a coping mechanism. There's a brilliant series of books by a guy called Lawrence Gonzalez, who's written books about survivors and people who, these are the sort of people who plane crashes in the jungle, 100 people are left alive, but only 2 of them emerge from the jungle. And so he was really interested. What are the characteristics that define survivors? Or these might be people who are lost at sea for months and months and months, but survive. And the characteristics that generally that you find in survivors is not like an earnest endeavor. It's not like, right, I'm going to get through this. They often laugh and make fun of it. They often, they say, you know what, I knew
Got a positive mindset, basically.
Exactly. I knew my situation was ridiculous. So I used to laugh every day thinking, I'm never going to survive this. And it was that sense of open-minded wonder, the sort of the willingness to laugh that got them through it. So when someone sees someone on a footballer laughing when they're a goal down, that is not reason to be angry with them. That's time to recognise, great, they've got the right.
Because they're going to have more energy and more. They're going to play more positive passes. They're going to take more shots because they're in a positive frame of mind. No one creates positive actions in a negative mindset.
Yeah,
I can't. That'd be crazy. Like
exactly.
It reminds me of I spent my entire life in a stressful environment, i.e., sales.
Yeah.
B2B, cold calling, sales. That was as a 17-year-old, I was thrown into that but the bullpen of sales, a huge sales floor where it was like make a deal or lose your job.
Yeah.
That was my first experience in the world of work, which was the easiest one as a 17-year-old. And my team, we was like around the corner from the floor, and there would be so much energy and laughter coming from my team that my boss would always run around thinking that we're doing no work.
Yeah.
Whereas in fact, we was the highest performing team in the office. And no one really understood why we was having so much fun, but then we were doing so many deals and closing so many, business transactions, because we were all in that positive frame of mind. So we would ask for the deal. We would go for the close. We would deal with objections better from clients. And it would kind of rub off on everyone. And anyone that came in that was negative into our group would then all of a sudden become positive, because you can't walk into a group of positive people and continue to be negative. You'll either get weeded out very quickly, or you'll just become part of that culture and become very positive. And I remember my boss said one time to me, they're not your friends, Chris. They're your employees. You need to stop like having so much fun with them. I was like, no, this is working. I was like, I'm not going to change. But yeah, so exactly I completely agree with that.
And how many organisations are you expected to have like a serious face? You're meant to, you're meant to have that earnest thing.
So old school.
That's right. You must be familiar with the sort of the Galloped workforce survey. This sort of the biggest survey in the world of people at work. And if you look into the details of that, loads of people say they come to work and act as a different version of themselves.
Because they think they need to conform.
Yeah, that's right. They fake it. And the consequence of that is that their creativity is completely repressed. They feel like they can't be themselves at work. There's a direct consequence of those things. So absolutely, we need to sort of get past that. We need to allow people to feel like they can be a real version of themselves. The tragedy of all of this, I think, is that, I often chat to people and they say, oh, yeah. I don't love my job now, but 3 jobs ago, I loved that job and then I left it and I've never been happy at work again. And it's a real tragedy for me. And that's why I'm convinced that we can make work more enjoyable for people. And there's a real science to doing it. Often, like, those guys there, often there's a situation where you're not the boss. And so you just, you need to try and do this subversively. But just bringing enjoyment, letting people be their real selves at work. I think it's like a mission that presumably everyone who listens to this, that's their motivation. Bringing sort of an enjoyment to the work of the people who work for them.
the problem is everyone says that, but they want to kind of tick that box, or but then when it comes to pressures of hitting targets, all of a sudden that goes out of the window. I've seen many people that attempt to do it, and they're like, well, we'll just go back to the way things work. And like, just because and for example, there's companies that I've worked in, right, that's made incredible revenues and have done amazingly well, but the entire company's miserable. So I've worked in those companies. I'm sure you may have as well, where like they're generating insane amount of revenue monthly. Their margins are insane, and like everything's, the sales are through the roof, but everyone's miserable. And even when we achieved incredible goals that we never thought possible, next year we're going to put out by another 20%, Chris, and another 20%. We already barely got up the mountain to get that first 20% increase in revenue. So it's just, I think this is one of the reasons why it's so exciting. So based on all the conversations you've had, and obviously you've got 30 ways in there, but what were some of the biggest common mistakes that you see companies make?
The critical thing is that too often we idolize people like Elon Musk. We idolize these people who work long hours, and we believe that in some way that working long hours is the differentiator. It's not necessarily anything other than it's how hard you work. And the evidence, and I loved the fact that when I looked into this and I started discovering evidence, I was really blown away by the fact that there's no really good evidence for long hours. In fact, former investment banker, a woman called Alexandra Michel, and she looked at the world of banking, and in banking it's routine to do 120 to 130 hours a week. Now, the long term, long term, and I think probably there's a lot of people though who listen to this who do half of that, who work sort of 60 hours a week, and they work a long time. And what was interesting about the investment bankers is that they were making themselves sick, and you could almost catalogue it like by year 3, by year 4, they'd often done a lot of damage themselves. They'd built up anxiety, eating disorders, skin problems. One guy had got cancer, which he attributed to the amount he was working. Their immune systems were crushed. And so you were observing all these things. Now, look, most of us might not work that long. I guess it's not uncommon for people to put in a 60-hour week and working, especially if you include time on their phones. People are putting in a lot of hours. And what I was really interested to discover was there's no science for that. In fact, any of the people you look at, you see evidence that if you work shorter weeks, but with more intensity, you get way more done. It's why I love the guy who runs Slack. His contribution to culture is he says people should do a good day's work and go home. And, they celebrate people having side hustles. They celebrate people doing things with their spare time. And I think that's a much better model for me. So, I think all of us have got it into our head, maybe through sort of academia or whatever, that whether you're studying for exams or when you're writing an essay, you tend to work long days, long hours, you burn the midnight oil, and you forget that the sort of the trade-off is you work an all-nighter writing an essay, but the next day you sleep all day. And we forget that. We remember the late hours. We associate achieving things with working long hours and late nights, and we forget that actually quite often there's a trade-off. So for me, getting really clear evidence that putting an intense period of working, but sort of prioritizing relaxation and prioritizing sort of a proper work-life balance is really important.
Yeah, and I'm a culprit of that myself. Even last night, I was up to like 4 a.m. doing work. Right?
What are you doing?
Because exactly, but then now I'm suffering today from it, right? So I'm not going to be as alert and creative and etc. doing it whilst I should be. That's my problem. I think most co-founders and most people just went to turn themselves off, like switch off.
Yeah.
That's my biggest problem. And a lot of times it's my wife.
Yeah.
So you need to switch off now. You literally have to go to sleep. You just continuously work. And even on the weekends, I'm like, find myself hovering over to the computer and she's like, no, come back. No more work, Chris.
The interesting thing, Chris, is that there's loads of scientific papers on that. So the scientific papers on working hours, on the impact of taking a break. So like the improvement in what you achieve productivity wise, in terms of taking a break. One of the most fundamental things is that there was a brilliant guy called John Penkerville at Stanford University, and he did a piece of work just looking at data sets of people who were working, and he looked at the amount that people worked if they worked 7 days a week, and the amount that people worked if they worked shorter periods. And he found people working 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. By taking Sunday off, they actually did more in the week than if they worked on a Sunday.
Makes sense.
So, literally the hours you were working on Sunday were producing nothing. They were actually destroying what you were doing through the rest of the week. And that's it. All the evidence suggests that we sort of, it's a lie we tell ourselves, and work can be a lie we tell ourselves.
I think for a reason I struggle more than most is that was drilled into me for over 10 years, because in sales, it literally is the more you work, the more money you make.
Yeah.
The more phone calls you make, the more emails, the more proposals, the more money you make. So I literally was in a job where that was the differentiator, that the more sales calls I did, the more hours I spent in the office, it was directly reflected in my paycheck every month. But then unfortunately, I've taken that into other areas of my life where it doesn't actually give the same return. So I'm so used to doing that, because I went from, coming from a very poor family to going into a sales job and, as a 18, 19-year-old making six figures a year because I did those hours. So I kind of transformed my entire life based on that, if that makes sense. So even though I walk in my house and look at my house and look everything I own, the car, it all came from that kind of hustle. Yeah. But it doesn't work in the same context now I own my own company, because I can't continue to do that and get the same results. And you are right. The best results I get aren't from those late nights. There's not been one of those late nights where I've stayed up and done a piece of work that was really amazing. Whereas during the day, being in the office, alert, creative, with my team, engaged in the moment with the team is where the best results come from. So,
and I think you've hit on something there. The future of work is about, even though we might not see ourselves as creative, the future of work is about creativity. The reason why is because anything that's functional and sort of routine is going to be increasingly automated, or there's just going to be software that helps do some of those things. So, the future of work is we need to be sort of building our muscles. We need to be in training now to develop our creativity, where creativity is just, back to the sales analogy, just putting new packages together or new ideas or thinking of something that matches a client's needs. So this isn't sort of Pixar animation creativity. This is really simple, coming up with ideas. And the future of work is going to be shaped like that. If you look at any of the evidence about how creativity is forged and how it's formed, it doesn't come from stress. In fact, stress kills it.
Of course.
It lives in the gaps between things. So if you're continuously busy, then creativity never gets the chance to be stimulated. One of the things I love, if you study the brain, if you look at the brain, the thing that often leads to creativity is something called the default network. It's sort of like when we're daydreaming. It's why some of our best ideas happen when we're just walking into the office, or we're,
every day.
That's right. Or I was at a gig yesterday and an idea came to me while I was listening to a song. It's because my brain was sort of drifting off and listening to other things. I love the fact that Aaron Sorkin, who's the writer of The West Wing, and he wrote The Social Network, and he said he clearly he stumbled upon this, but he takes 8 showers a day. And
my best ideas come in the shower as well. Sleep and shower, those two, because you're not really thinking. That's right. You're just in the moment.
The default network. And at work, we fill our lives with so many emails and meetings that we never allow ourselves time to daydream. But Aaron Sorkin, he said, I'm not sort of obsessive. I'm not a cleanliness obsessive. I find when I'm struggling to do something, when I go into the shower, something comes to me.
Yeah, I try and create those moments as well. Yeah. So mine, as I told you, is like when I'm going to sleep, normally my ideas come. Shower, definitely one. Also gym. So I find literally I could be, because I think it's those activities where you're not thinking about other things and you're kind of in the moment doing it, whether it's having a shower or just preparing to go to sleep or, or working out. For me, in the gym, always halfway through a workout and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, very good idea just comes to me. But I think a lot of people never give themselves that moment.
Exactly that. If you're working 130 hours a week, there's no moments for that.
Yeah.
There's no moments for your brain to start sort of floating and piecing things together. But your brain loves doing it. It's why boredom's such a powerful thing. The fact that society's pretty much on a course to eradicate boredom is a bad thing, because
I love that. I mean, I'm such a strange, like, I find it really, I tell you a story which is really random, but we just had a baby, as everyone knows by now on the podcast. I've already heard it. But I had an office at home where I used to sort of, my quiet time. I'll go in there and I can do work, and it was just kind of my own space. And that's now the baby's room. So I don't have that anymore. And there's no space in my house where I can go and just be the quiet place. And I'm finding that really hard at the moment, to be able to go there and reflect and just take a moment away from my team, away from my family, away from everything, to be honest, where I can just be. And that's where the best things have happened. And over the last few months where I haven't had that, I actually find that really, really difficult to find a place where I can just be in that space. My wife's the opposite. She wants to plan every hour, every minute of the day. And I like certain days where I just take a day off and I do nothing. But just think, go for a walk and just think, and just, my day can go wherever it wanted to go. And those are the best de-stressful days. I don't have any anxiety on those.
Absolutely.
Days, and I feel so good. So you touched on a few of the 30 ways. What are some of the other ones that stand out to you the most, that you think, especially our audience can use?
So I've split it into 3 sections. The first section is all about recharging yourself and sort of getting, the science I talk about is I guess good work culture is a combination of positive effect, sort of good mood, and psychological safety. Positive effect really pioneered by psychologists like Alice Eisen, but people like Barbara Fredrickson, and they really worked on positive effect, just how when we're in a state of positive effect, which is broadly but not exactly the same as good mood, we tend to do a more complete job. Our brain thinks of more things. There's more ideas available to sort of collide with each other. So the first 12 is about getting into a state of positive effect. And so that's often quite personal. That's just about the power of breaks, or, the liberating power of going for a walk. I think something you've hit upon there. Often ideas come in those moments. The first 12 of that. Then there's 8 ways to build sync in teams. And where sync is probably one of the most important things. When humans are in sync with each other, and you can do it when you watch people singing in a choir. It's really interesting. There's so much science on studying choirs, because people in choirs demonstrate a capacity to deal with more pain. So they put people through these pain tests. And if you've sung in a choir, you show more resilience. You actually sort of become, there's like this invisible aura that comes around you when you're in a choir, or when people are at a football ground together, or when people are dancing together. There's this strange invisible energy that exists when people are in sync. And so if you can create that in a workplace, it has a really powerful effect on the sense of belonging people have at work, the sense of sort of affinity, of cohesion they have in a working environment. So there's 8 ways to build sync between people. And then the final thing is 10 ways to sort of build a buzz in teams. And buzz is something where you often hear people talk about. There was the British CEO, a woman called Margaret Heffernan, and she talked about when she was the CEO of certain companies had a real hum to them. And, I was really interested in that phenomenon, that people observe that when a team's going well, like your sales team you were talking about earlier, where there's a real buzz to it. And I was interested, back to the example that people said to me that, I've worked in one place that was great, but 6 places that weren't great. I was interested in studying what it is that creates that buzz. And so, these 10 ways to build that buzz, and some really fascinating examples, really. Sort of, for me, buzz is when there's a combination, as I've sort of hinted at along the way, when you've got the combination of positive effects and psychological safety. And they don't always exist in conjunction with each other. You can have psychological safety without people feeling positive effect at work. The obvious example there is these Bridgewater, which is like this radical transparency investment firm, and where they've got, it's mandated that you've got to give direct feedback to each other all the time. But actually, the employee turnover, about 40% leave in the first year. It's really sort of a tough place to work, but everyone is very direct, very honest with each other. The worst manager knows that they're the worst manager because it's on a board on the wall. You know, like
You know, it's funny about that. We have, I love that. It was the same thing on our sales floor. You had how brutal is it that you have a board that had, 50, 70 people's names on it. And you would see when you walk in the office, who's the worst person on the entire floor. And you'd have the sales figures for the year next to the person. And I was born into that environment, so I kind of thought this was normal. It really wasn't normal at all. And but that was also like an unspoken rule, like an unspoken thing, because that you'd walk in, no one needed to see who was the highest performer in the company, and no one needed to see who was the lowest performer. It was literally on a whiteboard, and it was updated daily by someone based on the sales that came in. And that was so brutal.
To me, that's really dangerous, because shame,
it was. And people would look at people and be like, why are you going for lunch?
Yeah, that's right.
You're at the bottom of the board. Or why are you going home at 5 p.m.? You're at the bottom of the board, you know? And I hated that. I hated it, but I also, at the same time, I hated it, but I always wanted to be at the top.
Yeah.
So I basically turned it into like a fire beneath me, that I was always going to be in that top 5 or that top 3, right? But for other people who weren't strong enough mentally to deal with that, it destroyed people when they left the company.
Absolutely, but it will do more than destroy their job. That'll you'll get PTSD from that, because
it's brutal. I'm thinking about it now. It's crazy, right?
Man.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's what this company, Bridgewater, the radical transparency company, does. It sort of has a table where if you're the worst, you're at the bottom, and everyone knows it. Now, for me, that's.
I'm surprised in the modern day and age that that's how things still exist. But at the same time, I can see why it would work.
Yeah.
Because it means that the people that stay there are they're just open and they've accepted it. So that means that this kind of because sometimes those conversations are what's in the way of you moving forward.
Yeah.
Because we're going to wait until a year and do our yearly review before giving you feedback?
Yeah.
Which is even more crazy in my mind. And especially in a workplace where it's moving so fast and these conversations need to happen quickly, disruption, innovation, you have to move fast. But I don't know about publishing it. That's a whole nother. Encouraging open feedback and continuous feedback is one thing, but then putting it on a board, it's very strange.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah. But I like the team. I think Google, you correct me if I'm wrong, they have it the other way around, where it's a team, right? So it's a team target, and then it's all about us getting to that achieving that target together.
Yeah, that's right.
As opposed to pitting everyone against each other.
Yeah, and you tend to find that in environments like that, there's more collaboration, there's more cooperation, and people work better together.
Because everyone's going towards the same goal, as opposed to pushing against each other.
Yeah,
trying to do that. Interesting. Any other things that you want to share with the audience?
I guess my interest first and foremost was, is there a way to make work better? And so so that's why I'm publishing it on the. I'm publishing on Blue Monday, so the most miserable day of the year.
Was that intentional? Obviously?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The publisher said to me, we'll publish in April. I said, well, my feeling is if we could publish on the most miserable day of the year, then it gives people sort of a hope and salvation. But it's available for pre-order. I probably should say that now, shouldn't I?
Yeah, you should. And where's the best place to grab a copy?
Yeah, you can. It's available on Amazon or on Waterstones if people want to pre-order it there. The reviews have come. The first reviews have come in, and the good news is I put some jokes in there. I mean, I threw along the way, and people have noticed them. So it would have been disastrous if I'd tried to make it an entertaining read and people had not noticed.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Honestly, I'm really excited to read it myself, if I'm honest. And I think every single person listening to the show right now needs to grab a copy. All of you guys, you need to grab a copy of this book. You're all leading, you're all leading employees. And some of you I know personally are leading, over 300,000-400,000 employees in your companies. You know who you are. You need to send a copy of this book to everyone in your team. Before we wrap up, Bruce, if there's one parting piece of guidance for our listeners, what would that be? And also the best way for them to get in contact with you personally if they wish to connect and reach out to you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I always welcome people hitting me up on LinkedIn, so that they can always connect with me there. I always accept people there, and some of the best chats I have actually are on LinkedIn. People are sort of interested in talking about these things. The one bit of advice I would give people is that I'm convinced that we can improve work. You know, often it feels overwhelming and it's only moving in one direction. I read something saying that the average manager spends 23 hours a week in meetings. And, you know, I think most of us will recognise that a lot of our time is consumed with these things. And the nature of it is therefore you end up feeling overwhelmed and unable to cope and helpless to change it. I'm convinced we can improve work, and that's partly individual and it's partly sort of a company initiative. It's why your audience is so important on this.
Fantastic. Well, look, guys, as always, if you head over to hrleaders.com, there you'll find the show notes for an episode, everything we'll be talking about there. There'll be a link to the book in the description for you guys, so to make it easier for you. Bruce, thank you again for taking the time out to join us, and I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Thank you. Cheers, Chris.